In this lesson, I'll show you how to multiply, divide, and power complex numbers that are in trigonometric polar form. I want to start off with an example where we convert a complex number that's in rectangular coordinates to one that's in trigonometric polar coordinates, such as the one that you see here, to one that's in trigonometric polar coordinates, which is this format. The question reads, given the complex number z is equal to -1 minus the square root of 3i, plot and then convert to complex trigonometric polar form. That being said, I'll create an xy plane where my y-axis represents the imaginary numbers and my x-axis represents the real number. This is my real number and this is my imaginary number. So this is img and this is my real number. Negative square root of 3 means that we'll be going down, and this -1 means that we'll be going to the left 1 unit. So our point should be in the third quadrant. I'll call this point z. And I'll say that this is negative square root of 3, and this is -1. That takes care of A. In part B, we're asked convert to complex trigonometric form. To do this, we'll be using these two formulas. And to find our r, we take the square root of a squared plus b squared. This number represents a, and this one represents b. So r is equal to the square root of -1 to the power of 2 plus minus the square root of -3 to the power of 2. This becomes 1, this becomes 3. Taking the square root of this gives us plus minus 2. Next, let's find out theta. We'll use the second formula. Arctan means the inverse tangent. So theta is equal to inverse tangent of negative square root of 3 over -1. Using your calculator or special triangles, you'll find out that this is equal to pi over 3. Now, because we are in the third quadrant, pi over 3 is an acute angle, means that it's in the first quadrant. So to find out this angle, you'll take pi, which is half a circle, plus pi over 3, and you end up with 4 pi over 3. So this has an angle of 4 pi over 3. And because it's going this way, we have to choose a positive radius. Because if we choose a negative radius, that means your angle is in the first quadrant. But we know that our point is in the third. So we'll write down r is 2 bracket cosine 4 pi over 3 plus sine 4 pi over 3. And either you can use j or I, it's up to you. I'll stick with j. So this is a trigonometric polar form for this complex number that was in rectangular coordinates. Now we can move on to multiplying. To multiply two numbers that are in trigonometric polar form, you use this pattern, where you multiply your r's. 6 times 5 is 30. And then you take your cosine angles, 20 and 40, add them up. That's equal to 60 degrees. Plus, and notice that this notation uses the letter I. So it's up to you which one you want to use. We'll write down sine of 40 plus 20. That's also 60 degrees, I. That's the product of z1 times z2. What about dividing numbers that are in trigonometric polar form? Well, for that we use this rule. We'll divide our r values. 50 divided by 5 is 10. And we'll write down cosine. We'll subtract the two angles. 4 pi over 3 minus pi over 3 is pi. Plus sine, and the same thing. We have pi times your imaginary unit I. Finally, in the last question, I'll show you what to do when you are powering your complex number. Notice that our example is right here, and it's raised to the power of 5. In that case, you take r and you raise it to the same power. 2 to the power of 5 is 32. Bracket, cosine n, which in our case is 5. 5 times 30. We'll simplify in a moment. Plus sine 5 times 30. Times our imaginary unit I, we end up with 32. Cosine of 5 times 30 is 150. plus sine of 150 I. Now notice that the question wants us to write this in rectangular form. So at this point, you want to simplify cosine 150. You can use your calculator for that. Make sure that it's in degrees. Now it is. We'll write down cosine 150, and we get negative the square root of 3 over 2 plus sine of 150 is half. Multiplying this 32 into these two terms. 32 times negative square root of 3 over 2, that's negative 16 times the square root of 3 plus 16i. And there you have it. 4 examples on how to multiply, divide, and power complex numbers that are in trigonometric polar form.